Thank you for attending today's presentation or watching the video. My name is Douglas Lauritsen, and today we will be discussing the implementation of AutoCAD Map 3D on Citrix XenApp. On the agenda today, we will discuss documentation, hardware and software requirements, the Autodesk Network License Manager, installation and configuration, some scalability information, and the uninstall of AutoCAD Map 3D 2011. Documentation that's readily available on the internet includes the Map 3D Citrix post-install scripts available through a technical solution on the product support web pages. There's also the Citrix landing page for Autodesk Map 3D. Citrix has their best practices for Autodesk software web page, and there's also the white paper for AutoCAD Map 3D 2009 Citrix XenApp 4.5 performance analysis. Documentation that's available on the media or from the electronic download include the Map 3D Citrix install guide, the README, the license addendum, and the Map 3D 2011 uninstall guide. Many of these files, including the performance analysis, are also available as handouts for the presentation. So hardware requirements for the server tier, and these would include either a single XenApp server or several XenApp servers that are part of a farm. In the Citrix environment, each user consumes above 300 megabytes of memory. You'll want one or multiple multi-core CPUs. You also want very fast hard disk access. Recommended are SCSI, RAID 5 or 6, as well as serial attached storage with either SCSI or fast SATA. There are no requirements for a display adapter, as hardware acceleration is not available in the Microsoft Terminal Services environment or in the Citrix XenApp environment. Hardware requirements for the client tier are very minimal, as state-of-the-art hardware is not required. Many customers are using the XenApp client for Windows, Macintosh, Unix, and Linux, but the Citrix XenApp client is available for many other operating systems. Software requirements for Map 3D 2011 in the Citrix environment are the Microsoft Windows Server 2003. Product support recommends you use the Enterprise Edition. Also, you'll need the Terminal Services and Internet Information Services roles. User CALs for your intended Terminal Services connections are also required. For Citrix XenApp, Map 3D 2011 is Citrix ready for versions 4.5 and 5.0. You'll need user CALs for your Citrix user connections, as well as the Citrix clients. For Autodesk software, AutoCAD Map 3D 2009, 2010, and 2011 are Citrix ready. Optionally, you can install AutoCAD Raster Design 2010 and 2011. You'll need the Autodesk Network License Manager, and you'll also need special network license files to be configured in that Network License Manager. Installation and configuration steps for Map 3D include installing the operating system on your hardware, enabling the Internet Information Services and Terminal Services roles prior to installing Citrix, the installation and configuration of the Citrix licensing, as well as the install of Citrix XenApp. Leave the Citrix install to a pro. When Citrix is completely installed and configured, you can then move on to the install of Autodesk software. You'll want to start by installing and configuring the Autodesk licensing, then install AutoCAD Map 3D. After Map 3D is installed, you can optionally install AutoCAD Raster Design. Then, as the installing administrative user, you'll want to test start and configure AutoCAD Map 3D and Raster Design, then run a script to save those user settings to a template folder. When that's complete, you can then step back into Citrix and publish AutoCAD Map 3D for users. And finally, when the users log in, they will need to run a script to apply the template to their user account. For licensing of Citrix and Autodesk products, they both use FlexNet and FlexLM technologies from Flexera. Citrix uses TCP port 7279 for their vendor daemon, and by default, when you're installing and configuring, you can choose 27000 as the port for the master daemon. Autodesk uses 2080 for its vendor daemon, and the master daemon automatically chooses a port somewhere between 2700 and 27009. This can be specified in the license file, and we do recommend it in the Citrix environment. In later slides, we'll discuss that. Oftentimes, firewall port considerations need to be made. So for the license services, you've got the 7279 for Citrix, the 2080 for Autodesk, and the range of 27000 through 27009. For that range, you need only open the ports for which you have license managers configured. Also, the Citrix client uses 1494 and HTTP port 80. Best practices for configuring Citrix and Autodesk licensing are to use a computer that is not part of the XenApp farm to ensure that all licenses are available if one of those servers goes down. If both license services are installed on the same host, you can configure the master daemons so that they do not share the same port. Citrix, like I said previously, by default will use 27000. You can configure Autodesk to use a different port by specifying that port at the end of the first line in the license file. In the example shown here, port 27001 is specified. For Citrix, the Autodesk Network License Manager files have a different format for the increment. They do not include dup_group equals UH in the increment stream. However, they do use the same feature name, so they cannot be combined with other licensed services for Autodesk Map 3D and Raster Design. The example shown here includes a license for Map 3D 2010 and Raster Design 2010. If you do not have a redundant farm, it is okay to install everything on the same machine. You just want to make sure that you consider the TCP ports for the master daemons. I will now demonstrate the install and configuration of the Autodesk Network License Manager alongside the Citrix License Manager. Here I'm going to install the Autodesk Network License Manager for coexistence with Citrix's licensing. First off, I've already acquired my license file. When you do so, you'll want to make sure you have some information such as the contact information about the account, the serial number, the host name of the computer that's going to have the license manager, and the MAC address. I've done so by using the command line and the IP config/all option, and here we can see the host name and the MAC address. Before I actually install the license manager, I'm going to look at the Citrix licensing configuration. You can do so by looking at either the server or the farm properties. In my case, I'm going to look at the farm properties, server default element, and choose license server. In this case, they're using 27000. So I'm going to configure mine to use one of the range of 2700 through 27009. So I'll put a space after the MAC address on the first line of the license file, and then do 27001, so it's a different port than what Citrix had. And I'll go ahead and save that, and then I will go and install the Network License Manager. So on the map installer, I'm going to choose Install Tools and Utilities. And I'm only going to install the Network License Manager on this machine, and I'm going to do the defaults along. So accept the License Manager. I won't be choosing configure. So choose install, say yes that I'm using the defaults. Let the install finish, and then in my install location, I'm going to create a new folder called License, and in that folder, I'm going to set up my debug log file. And I'm also going to put my license file there. Once that's done, I can launch LM Tools. We can see Citrix already has their licensing installed, or this is their license service. I'm going to go to Config Services. I'm going to give a new service name. And as soon as I choose Tab, I've got the service name started, and it'll clear the other fields. Go ahead and browse to the master daemon, which is lmgrd.exe. browse to the license file. When the master daemon reads the license file, it launches the vendor daemon. And I'm also going to choose my debug log file. When those are done, I want to make sure to use services, and I want to make sure to start the server at power up. So I can save that service. I can come over here to start, stop, reread. I can start the service. I can switch over to the server status, perform a status inquiry. We can see that my license file has been read. We're on version 11.7 of the license manager. And here's my feature code for my 5 seats of AutoCAD Map 3D 2011. Some more details about installation and configuration of several of the Map 3D products. First of all, with Map 3D 2009, you can install from either a deployment or the DVD. You'll want to make sure that when you configure the install for the deployment or from the DVD that you choose the Network License Manager. For AutoCAD Map 3D 2010, you can only install from the DVD or from the download. If you try to install from a deployment, you may find that it quits when failing on a PIT file. And again, you'll want to make sure that you configure this for the Network License Manager. Again, for Map 3D 2011, you can install from either the DVD or download or a configured deployment. And this also requires that you choose the configure button and configure for the Network License Manager. For Raster Design 2010 and 2011, you can install from either the media or a deployment. And as with Map, you want to choose the Network License Manager. Microsoft and Citrix recommend setting the Windows Server to install mode when installing applications for terminal services. The URL at the bottom of this, you can find more information from Microsoft on this. There is much debate in the IT community as to whether or not this setting is actually necessary with Windows Server 2003, as this operating system can recognize the install of many applications. If you choose to do this, you can enable the install mode from the command line by choosing change or typing change space user space / install. And when you are done and completed the installation of applications, you can switch back to execute mode by typing change space user space / execute. As Microsoft and Citrix recommend this, we do consider it a best practice to enable these modes. I will now demonstrate the administrative tasks of installing AutoCAD Map 3D, test starting and configuring Map 3D, and running the script to save the user files in the user template. I will also publish Map 3D from the Citrix Access Management console. The critical thing with installing Map 3D for the Citrix environment is to choose network licensing. We'll go ahead and choose to install AutoCAD Map 3D 2011. We will accept the licensing agreement, enter our user and product information, enter the serial number and product key, and to get to the point where you can enter the licensing information, we want to choose the configure button, choose network licensing, choose the licensing mode, then enter the computer name for the license server, and we can choose configuration complete if we're doing a default install for the rest of it. I will click install now. After I've installed Map 3D 2011, I'm going to test start it and also do some pre-configuration for performance recommendations. So I'll turn on the command line. I will turn off dynamic input, go into options, and I'm going to disable all of the show tooltips. You may choose to leave some of these on. I will also turn off all of selection preview. You may choose to leave when a command is active on. And we'll go ahead and quit out of it. After we've run Map 3D, we can run our script to save our template, and we'll see that we've saved our 2 folders, our registry export, and our file with our username. When publishing through Citrix, I'm going to use the start icon as the location of the target for the command line, the start in for the folder, and the location of the icon as well. So launching the Citrix Access Management Console, I'm going to go to the farm area, choose Applications, New, Publish Application, and next give it a name. In my case, I'm doing AutoCAD Map 3D 2011. Next, it is an application, so we'll leave the defaults there. Next, so for the command line, we need to use the command or the target from the start icon. For the working directory, I'm going to use start in from the icon without quotes. Go ahead and choose next. Then we need to add the farm or the server from the farm that has the application. Then add a user. So in this case, it's a local user, so the domain is the name of the machine. And also I'm going to change the icon. I know from the start icon properties that it's in the install folder from Windows. And there's a couple of icons for the AutoCAD products, one for the Network License Manager, one for AutoCAD. And we'll go ahead and finish that. And we have Map 3D as an application. Last, I will demonstrate running the script to apply the user files to the user and the user's first start of AutoCAD Map 3D. There are three ways to launch an application that's been advertised with Citrix. One way is with the web interface, which I'm logging into here. Another way is with the program neighborhood. In the system tray is an icon for the program neighborhood agent. I'm going to use this to launch the Windows desktop. And then I'm going to explore to the template location to run the apply script. I'm going to run it by double clicking on it here, but I recommend that you run it from the command line normally. And then I'm going to go ahead and launch Map 3D. And we can see that dynamic input is turned off, the command line was enabled, and also our options for tooltips and selection preview, which we preset when we were test running it. Scalability testing has been conducted for Map 3D 2009 in the Citrix XenApp environment. Citrix recommends that Citrix XenApp administrators evaluate their environment and test data to determine an acceptable threshold for average resource utilization. This threshold accounts for the periodic CPU spike experienced during normal system usage, as well as providing a buffer for unexpected or scheduled server operations. In some instances, organizations may choose to increase or decrease the acceptable threshold based on application characteristics and redundancy requirements. In doing this, they established 3 user experience levels. For excellent, the user experience is equivalent or better than the local PC. For good, screen updates are fluid and there is minimal effect on the user's workflow. And for acceptable, screen updates are somewhat noticeable and latency is increased. However, the user is still able to function in a productive manner. In early testing, a single core computer was used with MS Windows Server 2003 R2 SP1. This computer had 4 GB of RAM, XenApp 4.5, and Map 3D 2009. In this testing, it was determined that the user experience degrades at 10 to 12 users with an 80% utilization spike on the CPU and processor queue length growth. In a second test configuration, a more powerful server is used. It has 2 quad-core CPUs, 16 GB of RAM, MS Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition, with the PAE switch enabled, XenApp 4.5, and Map 3D 2009. For this, it was found that user experience degrades at 45 to 50 users with 80% plus CPU utilization and disk utilization spiking above 50 users. More detailed user experience information on this configuration was that 15 to 20 users had an excellent user experience, 20 to 40 users, and the user experience remains good. At 45 to 50 users, the user experience is acceptable, and above 50 users, the user experience is considered poor. A much more detailed configuration is included in the AutoCAD Map 3D 2009 Citrix XenApp 4.5 performance analysis. This test configuration included a computer with 2 quad-core processors, 16 gigabytes of RAM, Windows Server 2003 Enterprise Edition, and the use of the PAE switch. For this system, the user experience was excellent for 0 to 30 users and good for 31 to 46 users. The charts on the right here come directly from the AutoCAD Map 3D 2009 Citrix XenApp 4.5 performance analysis, which is included as a handout for the presentation, and URLs were included on previous slides. Some conclusions about scalability testing and recommendations from Autodesk Product Support. The chart at the top of the slide here comes directly from the performance analysis white paper. Based on the results of the performance analysis, other analysis, and customer input, Product Support recommends that you exceed the RAM recommendations and use the lower range of concurrent users per core. A multi-core CPU with 6 to 8 gigabytes of RAM should be the minimum regardless of the number of users, and plan for 1 gigabyte of RAM for each concurrent user plus additional RAM for operating system, XenApp, and other processors. For example, to achieve an excellent user experience for 4 concurrent users, a multi-core processor and 6 to 8 gigabytes of RAM would be needed. If you are working on large data sets, you may need to exceed the RAM amount by several times. You cannot uninstall AutoCAD 2011 from a Windows Server operating system. If you need to uninstall, reinstall, or repair AutoCAD Map 3D 2011, you will need to delete the folders and registry keys that are created for this product. A list of these are on the slide here. However, I suggest that you go to our webpage and go to the TS, for which there's a link here, which is TS14898646. You'll need to delete several files for the install, files for each additional user, and the same for the Windows registry. This concludes the presentation on AutoCAD Map 3D 2011 in the Citrix XenApp environment.